Hi, folks. If you've joined us, we're just getting some logistics going and we'll get started in a moment here, hence the pause, but we'll be starting right away. One moment, please. Angelique, confirming that we're good.
Ready to start.
Thank you. Robert, please.
Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the Cradle-to-Career Governance Manual Review Committee meeting. My name is Robert Tagorda. I serve as the chair of this committee, and today marks our inaugural committee meeting, which will be run according to the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act as required by law. We plan to end no later than 2:30 p.m. I'd like to welcome the other members of this committee who are with me today. Members Furgiueli, Sablé, and I will be participating remotely as indicated on the agenda. Before we begin today, two small notes for members. Member Moldoff had prior commitments and is therefore unable to join us. In addition, I kindly ask that all members ensure that your cameras remain on throughout the duration of the meeting so that we can be in compliance with the requirements set forth in the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. There are 4 items on the agenda today, and all companion materials are posted on the C2C website. For members of the public who'd like to follow along, a visual and website link of where to find the materials can be found on this slide. Next slide. So let me begin with some opening remarks. I want to take a look at what lies in front of us this afternoon. First and foremost, the purpose of today's meeting is to review the drafted governance manual language and provide direction and guidance on priority topics in accordance with the committee charter. I want to take a moment to outline today's meeting logistics and expectations. So during agenda item number 2, members will have an opportunity to review and discuss the proposed governance manual changes. Members will be asked to focus on whether the proposed language is clear and accurate. One area where I anticipate us spending quite a bit of time is C2C's future direction for advisory board selection, terms, expectations, and responsibilities. During the August 15 governing board meeting, the board reviewed the current governance structure and the operational workload required to support a 21-person governing board alongside 32 advisory board members. To reduce the ongoing demands of the annual selection, onboarding, and offboarding cycles, the board asked our committee, the Governance Manual Review Committee, to work with the office to explore shifting from yearly recruitment to a 3-year cohort model. Under this approach, all 32 advisory board members would be recruited at the same time every 3 years rather than cycling members on and off on an annual basis. In addition, in light of the state's current budget environment and the board's ongoing conversations related to resource and staffing constraints, it's important that our committee contemplate how the office can remain both agile and responsive to changing circumstances and how this intersects with changes to the governance manual. So as we move into today's discussion, I ask that we in the committee lean into C2C's transparency value by identifying opportunities to ensure that the governance manual remains clear, concise, and easy to understand, while also identifying ways to streamline processes and reduce unnecessary bureaucracy. Finally, I want to remind the committee that our work here today needs to be within the scope laid out in the charter. We will walk through this during agenda item number 2. Given the scope of work, it's possible that we complete the charge of this committee in today's meeting, in which case a second meeting would not be necessary. If at any point any questions arise, General Counsel Julia Blair is available to provide guidance. So I want to thank members of our committee in advance for your understanding, for your preparation, and above all, for your forthcoming contributions to this committee's work. Okay, so with that precursor out of the way, let's call the meeting to order at 12:37 p.m. and ask that Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez please call the roll.
Tagorda.
Here.
Member for Joeli.
Here.
Member Moldoff. Member Sublé.
Here.
For the clarity of the record, we have 3 members present. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Stephanie. We'll now move to agenda item number 2, the bulk of the work that we'll be doing today. Overview and layout of the governance manual review process, including key milestones for the committee. I'll be presenting this agenda item, and alongside me will be Mary Kay Cruz-Jones, Chief of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships. Okay, so this agenda item is going to be broken down into 2 sections. During the first section, I will provide members with a high-level overview of the layout of the governance manual review process, select charter activities, and proposed corrections 1 through 8 identified in the corresponding staff report. Understanding the great workload that's ahead of us today, I wanted to make sure we take the opportunity to provide some background context and anchor our work in the governance manual, which states that, quote, "It will be a living document. It will be amended by the governing board over time to reflect the evolution of the Cradle-to-Career C2C data system. Changes to the manual will be considered by the Governance Manual Review Committee at least once per year at the second meeting after the start of the fiscal year. Additional changes may be considered based on proposals brought to governing board meetings and approved by the agreement threshold established in law, regulation, and/or the governance manual." So that's the paradigm within which we're operating today. Now, here are some select charter activities. As mentioned at the top, at the November 14, 2025 Governing Board meeting, the committee charter for the Governance Manual Review Committee was approved, and 4 governing board members were designated to form the committee this year. The committee charter specified 2 work areas that the committee will focus and provide input on. The 2 topics outlined in the committee's scope of work are presented here on this slide. To make this process as seamless as possible during part 1 of this agenda item, we will focus on all the proposed changes related to correcting typographical errors, providing stylistic changes, or adding technical additions and/or corrections. Here are the first 4 changes. And it's enclosed here in the inventory of changes for the first part of our work today. Correction number 1, standardizing term used to refer to C2C. Number 2, standardizing term used to refer to the office. Number 3, grammatical corrections. And number 4, clarification to C2C terms, naming, and procedures. So again, a lot of the technical and typographical errors. The page numbers are throughout the entire manual so that there's consistency across the document. Next slide. In addition, there are changes related to number 5, correction to the agency reference. That's found on page 9. Addition of hyphens in reference to evidence-based decision-making, standardizing terms used in relation to the Executive Director Performance Review, and updating the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act references and requirements to be in compliance with existing law. You can see the reference page numbers in the manual. I've just now reviewed the 8 types of changes that we'll be discussing now. These edits are found again throughout the governance manual, as well as in these specific pages. There are copious amounts of corrections for the committee to contemplate, but members Subley and Furgiueli, you've read the justification for the corrections as well as the proposed changes the office would like to enact. So I'd now like to open up 4-member deliberation here. Are there any questions or comments on the proposed changes, numbers 1 through 8? While you're thinking about this, I want to note a couple of other logistical things. We have allocated here 10 minutes at most for this discussion. During the member deliberation, the office will take notes on our discussion and screen share the notes document. This will allow members and the public to see in real time what's being captured, and it will also be a working document should there be a need to make changes after today's meeting. Mary Kate, please share the screen for the notes document. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I reviewed all of the suggested changes. I thought they made the manual read a lot clearer. And then making some of the corrections, for example, to references to the office and to the title of Cradle-to-Career actually makes is a more efficient way of speaking. And so I agree that with the staff recommendation that those are changes that should be made.
Thank you, Member Subley. Member Furgiueli, any thoughts or comments, questions from you?
Yeah, I would just second Member Subley's comments that I've read through the proposed changes and justifications for them. In addition to the wording changes that make sense and are a more clarified descriptions of C2C. I also think the changes to the advisory board appointment schedule makes sense to reduce the workload burden around onboarding and offboarding on such a frequent basis.
Thank you, Member Furgiueli. Concur with the remarks made by our 2 committee members. So I want to thank you for your contributions here on this section. At this time, then, I'd like to invite Mary Kate Cruz-Jones, our Chief of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships, to begin the second part of this agenda, which is going to be the more substantive and bulkier part of our work today. So, Mary Kate, please take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Let me stop my screen share real quick. Am I screen sharing actually? I think we're good now. Okay, brilliant. Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so thank you, members and members of the public, for that grace. Okay, thank you, Chair Tagorda. Good afternoon, members. I'm Mary Kate Cruz-Jones, Chief of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships. Today, the brunt of our conversation, or what I will be presenting on, will be focused on reviewing, discussing, and finalizing the draft language for the second section outlined in the committee charter's scope of the work. Thank you, Member Furgiueli, for just mentioning this. This section addresses the revisions to the selection for advisory board's committee process and advisory board member term limits, expectations, and responsibilities. So as Chair Tagorda has noted at the start of today's meeting, during the August 15 governing board meeting, the board discussed, and members, you may remember this conversation, that the current governance structure and the significant operational workload required to support it, we might want some changes here. And in recognizing the demands placed on both the office and the board members, governing board members specifically, those that are a part of the committee, related to the ongoing cycle of annual recruitment, onboarding, offboarding, the board directed the work of this committee to work with the office to explore transitioning from an annual recruitment process to a 3-year cohort model. The proposed changes we will be discussing here today will reflect that direction that we were given. Okay, so let's take a look at that inventory of changes. So this section includes 2 updates on the inventory of changes outlined in the staff report, correcting the advisory board annual recruitment references, as well as updating advisory board responsibilities. And I would now like to walk through these changes and discuss several considerations for members as we consider the impact of these changes. So, when considering these changes, we focused on 3 goals that emerged from the governing board member deliberations that have been emphasized throughout this year's governing board meetings. And so really, as we are contemplating these, we think that the proposed changes will help the office and C2C at large be more effective, efficient, and engaged. The proposed changes aim to strengthen sustainability by streamlining the operational workload associated with the selection for advisory boards processes from an annual cycle to once every 3 years. By having fewer recruitment cycles, this change also helps the governing board and the office remain agile and responsive with resources, as Chair Tagorda has mentioned, especially given the state's current budget constraints. Additionally, the proposed changes aim to increase the efficiency by lessening bureaucratic processes for both the office and the governing board. Annual recruitment implies convening the committee, repeating recruitment, onboarding, offboarding every year. However, a 3-year cohort model consolidates these tasks so that the office and the board handle them once every 3 years, freeing out both staff and governing board members for other strategic initiatives. In addition, an important goal for the proposed changes is to enhance advisory board members' experience with a focus on engagement. This is something that we've been talking about since late summer with the governing board. A 3-year cohort model would promote relationship building, learning opportunities, and shared experiences that we believe would enable advisory board members to begin with a similar context, and it would create opportunities for peer mentorship with past advisory board members and a train-the-trainer approach that prepares advisory board members to be C2C ambassadors in their communities. And this is something that advisory board members have expressed interest in. Members, you may be familiar with some of these proposals as we've seen this kind of come up in the last 2 years here. The cohort model will provide advisory board members with more opportunities to leverage their subject matter expertise in a meaningful way through extended engagement. And serving together for a full 3-year term would allow advisory board members to gain a deeper understanding of C2C's work, build stronger relationships with fellow members, and continue to allow them to contribute consistently over time. It's also worth noting, and members, you may recall this, that Ronnie Jones from LRI shared in November that we have been given similar input from outgoing advisory board members during their exit interviews. So this is all kind of tying together. I would like to share that I understand that what I'm sharing in this presentation goes beyond the 3-year recruitment model, but C2C's transparency value is really what I'm leaning into here. And we thought that it would be really important to disclose. Additionally, I'm hoping that with this additional context that we're providing in this presentation and today in this meeting, it can make these contemplated changes more understandable for both our governing board and advisory boards and folks in the public that are joining us here today. So in alignment with C2C's commitment to transparency, I'm asking that the committee focus on using language that is clear, consistent, and ensuring that our processes are easy to understand and navigate. And this is where I'd like you all to focus your attention. So prior to today's meeting, all members have had the opportunity to review the proposed changes to the governance manual. Today, we'll discuss how these changes may function in practice compared with the current process. And it's important to note that in order to achieve the key goals of supporting efficiency and supporting efficacy, the proposed changes noted in the manual do not include time-stamped milestones or timing. And I believe that this will allow the office to remain nimble and adaptable to changing circumstances and resources, right? We know that resources are tight, staffing is tight, and so we want us to be as agile as possible. Additionally, it's worth mentioning that the current manual is really not hyper-prescriptive, and so therefore we just maintain the original framework that's presented in the manual. So there are things that I'm going to talk about here that are written or prescribed. Under the current selection for advisory boards process, the board approves convening the selection for advisory boards committee in February, and the selection for advisory boards committee traditionally holds its first meeting in April. During this initial meeting, the selection for advisory boards committee approves the outreach plan, the selection rubric, and the application materials for both advisory boards. And then the application period opens around May and remains open for approximately 3 weeks. After the application closes, the office compiles all submissions, and the selection for advisory boards committee members review and score each applicant prior to the second selection for advisory boards committee meeting. At the second meeting, the selection for advisory boards are considered by the governing board members that are on the committee, and they select who those folks will be as runners up, and then ultimately goes for the final approval for the governing board, and that happens in August. The last round of this is that the office then onboards all new advisory board members in September to prepare them for their first meeting, which happens in October. And as you may notice, and as the office has felt it, this process is a little tight on time. We get there. And so in a contemplated future strategy, we're hoping to kind of extend that runway a little bit, and I'll talk through that now. So as I just mentioned, in this proposed new structure, the board would approve the selection for advisory boards committee in May. The selection for advisory boards committee would convene potentially around June, the application period opening in August. And there's a longer interval between the selection for advisory boards committee meeting 1 and the opening of the application period. And there's intentionality here. And the reason why we did this is to give additional opportunities for targeted outreach so that we can ensure that we are recruiting a diverse and highly qualified pool of applicants. Also, the application period is planned to coincide with the start of the academic year when school resumes. So the timing of the application launch in this way is designed to encourage greater participation from student applicants. And this is actually input that we got from the committee this year. They had asked if we could kind of cater to when folks are in school so we can get more student population on our advisory boards applying. But given our current timeline, it's something we couldn't cater to. The selection for advisory boards committee will hold its second meeting in October, and this schedule provides additional time for the selection of advisory boards committee members to review and score applications, which may be necessary given the potential for a larger applicant pool under the new proposed cohort model. And I just want to remind members that in the past, we've gotten about 100 applications per application cycle. So we'll see how this goes in future iterations. Based on this timing, the board could be asked to approve the recommended advisory board members in November, and then the office would then begin onboarding new members sometime between January and February. And given the new structure involves onboarding all 32 new advisory board members at exactly the same time, we're trying to cushion our time in here to ensure that we have a thorough and effective onboarding process that doesn't feel rushed. And once onboarding is complete, we intend for the new cohorts to convene their first advisory boards meeting maybe in March or sometime in the spring. So I'd like to take a look about this advisory board composition and what that transition from an annual selection for advisory boards process could look like given this 3-year cohort model in practice. The final group of advisory board members appointed through the annual recruitment cycle will complete their terms in August 2028. And the chart on this slide illustrates the transition period and the composition of both advisory boards as current advisory board members conclude their terms in 2026, 2027, and 2028. It also shows how the advisory boards will phase into the new structure once the annual selection process is finalized. So as shown here, the next recruitment cycle would begin in 2028, marking the start of the first full 3-year recruitment cohort. And the time between now and the next recruitment would give the office ample latitude to develop a comprehensive curriculum for future advisory board members. So as an office, we've already started contemplating some of this. An example of what we've been thinking about for the first year for this curriculum of the new cohort term would be having advisory board members focus more on building foundational knowledge and gaining a deeper understanding of Cradle to Career's work. Currently, what this looks like is they're onboarded, and in that first meeting, they just dive right into this proposal process, right? And it's a really short runway. And so we're hoping that with these new proposed changes, we can give them more time to kind of really understand, strengthen their knowledge, and then be more equipped by the time they get to the proposal process to hear, listen, and understand. And they can explore a little bit more and learn. This transition period will also allow the office to coordinate with the governing board on upcoming high priority initiatives that align with the 2028 to 2031 cohorts term. Identifying these priorities in advance will help ensure that the new advisory board members are prepared, supported, and positioned for meaningful engagement from the outset. And we are really looking forward to exploring these opportunities with you all as governing board members. So looking at the proposal process and how this is now affected or contemplated to be affected by the change, as defined in statute, it's an important responsibility of the advisory board to provide recommendations to the board. And one of the avenues, one of the ways in which they can do this is during the annual proposal process. So the process begins each spring and it concludes the following May when the board liaison and 2 advisory board members present their report. And this report summarizes the discussion that they have related to the proposals. It also includes the connection between all the proposals received and then how this connects to the work plan. Y'all may remember this from May of last year when it was presented to you all for the first time. Under the proposed 3-year cohort model, advisory board members would not be able to participate in the proposal process during their 3rd year, as their terms would end before the process concludes in May the following year. So the new cohort wouldn't yet be seated. So this is a little complicated here, and this is maybe where we can lean in and you can ensure that we're being really clear. We did not want advisory board members to miss out on any opportunities. So to address this, the proposed revisions to the advisory board proposal process allow members to submit their proposals during their 3rd and 2nd years. And the proposals would move through the full proposal process, be included in the annual proposal report. And during their 3rd year, they could submit it during the public submission window. And then these submissions would be added to the repository on the C2C website, and then they could be sponsored in future iterations by future advisory board members. So members are still able to submit the proposals every year. I want to be very clear on that. The chart reflected on this slide provides a visual of the overview of these proposed changes that would begin in 2028. Again, it highlights the key milestones in the proposed changes for the proposal process, with a focus on how this would impact governing board members, including the summer advisory board meeting. And this is the question and answer session that we invite our data providers to come to. So when we were looking at these changes, I do want to express that there was great intentionality given, again, to how workloads are shaped and formed and how we could be more efficient. And so this actually would lessen workloads that we ask on data providers because we wouldn't have these question and answer sessions annually. We space them out over time. So that could be something that our data providers are interested in. Brilliant. Thank you for this slide. Reflecting on the November 14 governing board meeting, Executive Director Bates emphasized the importance of clear governance. Governance at its core defines who has the authority to make decisions and in which areas. When governance is clearly articulated, it creates the conditions that create faster collaboration, more effective coordination, and greater consistency across Cradle to Career. So as you all have reviewed these proposed changes, we're hoping that you can consider these updates. And we think that this is really important to keep in mind because the work that you're undertaking today really plays a critical role in strengthening the clarity of our governance framework. Members, you may recall, recent board deliberations have focused heavily on C2C's future state. And as we begin planning for next year's Governance Manual Review Committee and looking for opportunities to further advance transparency, members are encouraged to look for opportunities to help us ensure that the language we discussed today, as I mentioned earlier, is all clear and that it's understandable for a broad audience, that it's streamlined, not redundant, and even if our visual aids are helpful, we're really looking for any sort of input in this area. So I'm concluding my presentation with the motion that's in front of us. And that motion says that the committee may move to approve the proposed edits as specified in the Red Line Governance Manual and staff report, and if needed, authorize the Office of Cradle-to-Career to make any additional revisions to incorporate changes determined by the committee. And with that, I'd love to end my presentation and pass it back to Chair Tagorda for member deliberation. Thank you so much, and here if you have any questions for me.
Thank you so much, Mary Kate, for the comprehensive overview of what our work is contemplating at this particular juncture in our not only committee meeting, but for the overall body of work of our advisory boards altogether. So just as with the first section, we've now allocated some time for member questions and comments on the proposed changes related to revisiting the selection for advisory boards committee process and advisory board member term limits, expectations, and responsibilities. And I want to ask that the office take notes just as we did last time. So please share your screen, allowing our members as well as the public to see in real time what's being captured. It will also serve as our working document and affirm our transparency value at C2C. Okay, so couple of notes here. And again, I'm going to open it up for members Sublay and for Joelle to provide their thoughts. At a high level, what are some of the ideas or questions that have arisen to your minds?
This is Member Sublay. I had a couple of questions, and one, with the first statement, I applaud the idea of being more efficient, specifically with limited resources. The question that I had, and it was one of the comments that Mary Kate mentioned, is the fact that on an annual basis, we see about 100 applications for advisory board positions. And in moving to a 3-year, especially since it's more coordinated with the school calendar and being able to have more student involvement, do we anticipate seeing that number increase when we go to the 3-year cohort? Or are we anticipating it'll still be, even though it's a 3-year cycle, it would be about 100?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful question, Mary Kate Cruz-Jones. It could happen. I think that there's always a possibility in which, yes, we could potentially get more applicants.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I was just wondering if when we consider the workload, would just keep in mind the fact that since we do have a greater opportunity to participate, and I would see it as a greater opportunity to participate, there might be an increase in the number of applications. But I think the fact that we have a longer, process time, even if there is an increase, I think you may have already contemplated the fact that we have more times to go through the process.
That is correct. That's what we were hoping for, to cushion the time. And that's also why we didn't want to be hyper prescriptive in the governance manual to commit ourselves to certain dates in case we needed a larger runway, should we get a massive influx and just need more time for the committee to process things, or the governing board as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Member Bergwelli. I think this is a really great proposal, and I like it both from the perspective of reducing the workload on the office for onboarding and offboarding, increasing the interval between the application and the seating and the meeting processes to give more time for that. I also really like the idea of 3-year terms, giving members more time to develop expertise and knowledge and feel less rushed with having to accomplish something over a shorter period of time, and maybe more deliberative in it. Um, um, you know, and especially given the responsibilities of these advisory boards in both identifying new data points and ensuring use and uptake of Cradle-to-Career products. Also, we have the research request process, which is going to be getting started, and they will have an important role in shepherding research data requests through. So I think giving them more time to develop expertise and knowledge around that will be beneficial for everybody. I do have a few questions. I didn't quite understand the table you showed about the number of advisory board members completing their term in the next 3 years. And I'm not clear on whether, if we go from 1 year to 3-year terms, does that mean we will have people with staggered terms where every year we'll still be doing this onboarding and offboarding, but people will be staggered? Or is it every 3 years we do a complete replace of the board?
That's correct. Thank you for letting me be more clear here. You're totally right with your second thought. We'd have to phase out our current model. So that's what the top of the chart is trying to imply. So next year we'll have 11 and 10 members. And then the following year we'll have 6 members on each advisory board. Then in 2028, we'll do the full recruitment, and that will be for a 3-year cohort. So we have to let members cycle off currently. We won't stagger any terms from here. From here, it will be everybody's going to get 3 years, and we're going to get all 32 members. Is that more clear, Member Bergwelli?
Yes, that makes more sense. So starting in 2028, we would be doing a full replacement. Okay. So given at that point, when we're, only onboarding and recruiting every 3 years, and we have people seated for a full 3-year term, and I admit I can't remember, is there currently a structure of leadership on these committees where there's a chair and a vice chair? And okay,
There's
so
not.
I'm just wondering, given that we want to build on expertise that's going to be built up, and maybe have a more robust agenda for people to pursue over a 3-year period, would it make sense to contemplate a leadership structure where, if we're going to have the same group of people seated for 3 years, does it behoove us to have a chair, a vice chair, something like that, similar to what we have on the governing board, to kind of ensure, like a more strategic, planning for the board's work over the course of 3 years, and maybe more defined roles within that, versus having people there for 3 years where everyone's kind of trying to figure out what their role is.
I'd be happy to interject and chime in. We can definitely contemplate it. I think my initial thought, based upon, because this is something that's come up in the past, I think that there's a beauty in our advisory board members having equity amongst, everybody being a member and there being no hierarchy. And additionally, I think in terms of the amount of liaising and coordinating that would potentially need to take place between a hierarchical model or a leadership type thing, with the advisory board members, that could also potentially increase workload, for the office, because it's additional coordination.
Right,
But
right.
and maybe it's something that could be a benefit. But I think in the past it was something that was discussed and decided upon as not the best model. I think that there's also some beauty in the governing board having its structure and our advisory boards having their structure, again, to just kind of highlight the differences in roles and ensuring that there's not, there's delineation there.
I'd say as well, to add to that, member for Joelle um, and member Soublé. I think that the governing board liaisons that we've assigned to our advisory boards serve to some degree in having some of that leadership function, because they serve as a conduit, obviously, from the governing board to the advisory boards, and can therefore provide a little bit of the strategic vision that a chair might otherwise perform from an advisory board. We also, I think, learned some lessons from a couple of iterations ago with the advisory board, in which there was a lot of voting and so on. That the jockeying for position ended up taking up quite a bit of time from the proper role and functioning of the advisory board, um, the advisory boards, in terms of like actually developing some ideas that the governing board would consider. And so I think it would, in this particular case, in light of the fact that we have liaisons already, as well as some of our experiences from the past, I hesitate to be very forthright about, specifying that they ought to have chair memberships.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking like if we go to a 3-year period, that's a much longer time to set, longer term goals. And in most cases, in those kind of structures, it does kind of help to have someone in a leadership role or multiple people in a leadership role to have more well-defined roles to, as member Takor had mentioned, like, people sort of competing with each other and trying to sort of, you know, have leadership without formal leadership could be complicating over a 3-year period. But I get
And
the trade-offs with the additional workload, and if it's already been discussed, I understand that.
if helpful too, so currently members serve on 3-year terms and it's rotating. So there's
Yeah,
not an extension to how long they would serve. If that's also helpful to
yeah,
just
that's true.
re-elevate.
That's true. And then I just one more question is, do you get the sense that people will be able to commit to a 3-year time frame on, in these, if we're going to go to like full replacement over every 3 years? Do you get a sense that the people who are applying for these roles will be able to commit to a 3-year period, especially if we're thinking about trying to attract more students into the role?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think we've had a really high success rate currently in terms of the folks that have come on are really interested, genuine and committed to the work. I do think that the cohort model would only strengthen that. And so I don't at this time anticipate that being a rub. But obviously I don't have a crystal ball. I think it's also worth noting that I believe one of the other changes that we enacted is to keep our processes intact and to not get additional workload. Um, Currently, what we do is if a member falls off midterm, they're replaced with a runner up. Um, this new version of the manual stipulates that, when you're signing up for a 3-year term, and should you step down during your 3-year term, there will just then be a vacancy on the board. I
Okay,
believe that change would also be a motivational point for members to, sign up only if they were truly committed, knowing that there's nobody to replace them. So hopefully that would incentivize.
got it. Thank you.
Their current term is for 3 years right now. Is that correct? So
Mhm.
what what has our general retention rate been over the course, for over the course of a standard advisory board member tenure?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I've almost been here for 3 years. I think I've done about 3 years worth of onboardings for advisory board folks. Thinking to community engagement, we had one member step down while I was out on leave, and we had one member Nellum, who became a governing board member, which was an extremely rare case. But if I can't do quick math, but it's 16 over 3 years. So I'll look to members to do that math for me, and two dropping out, if should we want to call it dropping out. And for data and tools, I think it's been pretty full completion, and I can, anybody else on engagement that's on this line, I'd be humbly corrected, but it's super high retention rate. We're talking very low numbers.
Right. So I think in some respects, then if we anticipate that the retention rate will remain the same, with additional incentives for advisory board members to make that extra commitment in light of the new structure, and the solution that we're proposing really simply addresses the idea of limiting the sort of mid-cycle onboarding and offboarding, then it looks like we can continue to maintain that same stability, while at the same time eliminating some of the unnecessary administrative burdens that we've seen over the past 3 to 5 years. Let me ask the group about the portion on the just the annual recruitment references in the governance manual. Did the language seem clear and easy to follow? Do the proposed changes offer enough flexibility for us? What are some of your thoughts on the way that the substance is being conveyed in the draft language and text?
I didn't have any trouble following the language. So if we're talking about clarity and understanding, I thought it was drafted in a manner that was pretty easy to understand. So I didn't have any concerns that there would be confusion or even causing someone to raise questions. And if there were questions, it would probably be pretty easy to answer. So.
And then how about in the correction number 10, which are the updating advisory board responsibilities, anything there around language clarity, flexibility, additional information that we might need to reduce any ambiguities in the proposed governance manual language?
There was probably like one time I was, in reading over it, I was confused, and then I had to slow down and actually read it, and was misreading the sentence. And then when I reread it, it was completely clear to me. I thought, wait a minute, there's a word here that's not correct. So I think if someone is taking their time and reading it and actually wanting to participate as an advisory board member, I really think the language is clear enough for someone that takes a careful reading.
I would agree. I didn't have any problem following it. I thought it was clear and a faithful kind of implementation of the changes we've been talking about.
Any other questions that perhaps we haven't anticipated that up until this point, or any other ideas before we begin to consider consolidating some of these proposed edits into a motion for our committee to present back to the governing board?
Chair Tagorda, it's not a here and now, it's a potential for the future, but just planting the seed. The office has contemplated, we could talk quickly about this, and getting your gut reactions. We've contemplated for efficiency's sake. Currently in the manual, we have a section for data and tools and a section for community engagement. Now, obviously, we wouldn't tamper with the scope or anything, but if we consolidated those two sections, there's a massive amount of overlap. So if we go to make changes, we aren't being duplicative and trying to marry the two sections. We probably could cut out about 2 pages in the manual. I'm seeing members who smile. So I'm thinking that that's maybe a yes, this is a great idea, and maybe something that we can tackle in 2026. Brilliant. Thank you.
Go ahead, Member Sublay.
Oh no, I'm smiling because as someone who's spent a lot of time drafting regulations and being more concise and not being duplicative, I'm a big fan of that.
No, I appreciate that. I actually think it lowers the risk of any confusion, right? When you've got content that is identical or nearly identical, you just want to refer to one area as opposed to multiple, because otherwise you increase the risk that there's going to be an error in some area. So I think that makes sense. And then in that event, you're not changing the substance. You're simply streamlining the presentation of the information.
I think you also eliminate questions. Wait a minute, is there something that's different that I'm missing because you've repeated this language here, and why is it repeated here? So I think you actually make it clearer.
I agree with that. Yes. So to the office, I think you're hearing quite a bit of energy around this idea and this notion to ensure that we've got a really clear and transparent governance manual.
Love it. Thank you.
Has the graphic on page 36 and page 41 that shows the timing of the advisory board recommendation process, has that been updated to reflect the new proposed schedule? I can't tell.
Yes, that's a wonderful question. I do not believe that it has been at this time, but it would if we gain consensus today, it's something that would be enacted and ready for February 2025. Excuse me, 2025, 2026. Tongue twister. When we bring it to governing board for approval.
Okay.
Okay, any other final thoughts and languages before we shift gears to the next portion of our presentation and agenda? Okay, seeing none, it looks like we're proceeding to slide 21, which is on a motion. And I'd like to ask the committee, may I have a motion to approve the proposed edits as specified in the redlined governance manual and staff report, and if needed, authorize the Office of Cradle-to-Career Data to make any additional revisions to incorporate the changes determined by the committee.
This is Member Sublay. I will make that motion.
Member Sublay moves. Is there a second?
This is Member Ferguelli. I second that motion.
Member Ferguelli seconds. With a motion and a second, we move to approve the proposed edits as specified in the redline governance manual and staff report, and if needed, authorize the Office of Cradle-to-Career Data to make any additional revisions to incorporate the changes determined by the committee. Before we vote, let's pause for public comment. At this time, we will open it up to members of the public for general public comment. Are there any speaker slips or anyone on Zoom who would like to speak to this agenda item?
No one in the room in Sacramento. Moving to Zoom, I ask that all members interested in making a public comment, please raise your hand at this time. Okay, I see one raised hand. I see two. Going in order. Roy, I have permitted you to speak. Give us one moment. And your 2 minutes begin now.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Roy Tongalava with Etrust West, and I'm here on behalf of the Data for the People Coalition. First, thank you for the opportunity to comment. We appreciate the proposed improvements today, including revisions to advisory board responsibilities and the shift to a 3-year recruitment model. In addition to these proposed changes, we also wanted to highlight an opportunity to strengthen the proposal process. In the most recent proposal cycle, many members of the public experienced some confusion about what happens at the conclusion of a proposal cycle compared to last year. We see opportunity to improve clarity and transparency to better support organizations in preparing strong, actionable proposals. To that end, we encourage this committee to more clearly define how proposals are reviewed, acted upon, and communicated back to the public. And we welcome your guidance on how the process can better ensure proposals inform the future work of the data system. Finally, we recommend stronger alignment between the annual proposal process, which typically concludes every May, and the C2C annual work plan development, which is typically approved every August, to ensure that proposals meaningfully shape the data system's priorities and ongoing implementation. Thank you again for your leadership and partnership. We appreciate the opportunity to weigh in, and we look forward to your guidance on these issues.
Thank you so very much for that public comment. Do we have another member of the public who'd like to speak to this item?
Yes, confirming we have one more individual. Jeanette Gomez, I have permitted you to speak. Your 2 minutes start now.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeanette Gomez, Associate Director for Policy with Californians Together, and also a member of the Data for the People Coalition. I first want to thank the committee for its clear commitment to remain clear, concise, and transparent with the public. And similarly to the public comment provided right before, as you consider meaningful improvements to the governance manual, we would also like to see it as an important and opportune moment to also strengthen the clarity and transparency of the proposal process. As Roy mentioned, given partners, including some of the authors of proposals, found it difficult to follow the developments in this past cycle, we would really encourage the committee to outline a clear pathway for how and why proposals are either reviewed, advanced, or potentially held in a repository. We'd also like to see that strength and alignment between the proposals process and the annual work plan outlined in the manual, which would, again, also help the public, I think, understand the capacity of the team and anticipate when proposals might ultimately be reflected on the dashboard. We really feel that these changes would strengthen trust, improve accessibility, and support a more informed public discourse. We look forward to continuing to support the continued development of these recommendations and really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak to this item?
Confirming no raised hands on Zoom, that closes the public comment portion.
Before we move to a roll call vote, I just want to thank the members of the public, particularly the Data for the People Coalition, who have taken the time to enter their ideas into the public record and for sharing on an ongoing basis their feedback to both this committee as well as to our advisory board and the governing board overall. We greatly appreciate your partnership and your stakeholder engagement. We now have a motion and a second, and we've closed public comment. So I'd like to invite Stephanie Gutierrez Valdez to please do a roll call vote.
Chair Tagorda,
Yes.
Member Fargiueli,
Yes.
Member Moldoff, Member Sublé.
Yes.
For the clarity of the record, we have 3 ayes and 1 absent.
Thank you very much. The motion passes. We'll now move on to agenda item number 3, general public comment. At this time, we will open it up to members of the public for general public comment. Are there any speaker slips for this agenda item in Sacramento?
Confirming no speaker slips or individuals wishing to make a public comment in Sacramento. Moving to Zoom. For members of the public, please raise your hand at this time if you would like to comment. Okay. Pausing and seeing no raised hands, that closes general public comment.
Thank you very much. With the closure of general public comment, we'll now move on to our final agenda item of the day, which is adjournment. I want to thank everyone who joined us today, specifically committee members Sublé and Ferjueli, as well as acknowledge the great work of the entire C2C team for preparing all of the materials and making them publicly available to Californians throughout the state. I also, again, want to thank the public for their invaluable input and support throughout this process and for continuing to encourage the governing board to embark on a series of continuous improvements so that we can honor our values for transparency and support. Our achievements are the result of collective collaboration, and your ongoing support has been truly wonderful. Before we conclude today's meeting, I want to take a moment to express my sincere appreciation as well for the committee's ongoing commitment to this work. Just in general, the governing board, this is an annual activity that we have, and I think it's a very valuable one for governing boards of our kind to engage in on a regular basis. We appreciate the efficiency and focus in addressing all of the chartered activities, and therefore because we were able to accomplish our goals, we will not need to hold our second meeting, which was originally scheduled for January 28, 2026. I also want to acknowledge and thank Mary Kay Cruz Jones, Stephanie Valdez Gutierrez, and the entire office for their continued efforts, including those who are behind the scenes, not only in preparing the materials, but incorporating the revisions that we've made today, all of the logistics that make this kind of activity and meeting possible. I want to thank all of you for that. This is one of countless bodies that you support throughout our organization, and I think it speaks volumes that we have so many engaged members of the public who want to contribute to our ongoing initiative. Lastly, our next in-person meeting in Sacramento will be our upcoming governing board meeting on February 25, 2026, where we will be hearing more about the committee's approved changes to the governance manual. More information will be forthcoming on the C2C website, so please check that. And now at 1:34 p.m., I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.